We're live on BCTV for the August 5th, 2014 Brattleboro Select Board meeting. Good evening, everybody. I'm David Gardenstein, Chair of the Select Board. Tim Johnson is not here tonight to give us his rousing introduction, so we'll just start the meeting without his helpful introduction. We're here for the first regularly scheduled August meeting of the Select Board. Has the meeting been officially warned?
Yes, it has.
All right, so we call the August 5 meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board to order. The first matter on the agenda is to approve the minutes from July 15 and July 22nd. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the July 15 and July 22nd minutes as presented. Is there any comments or suggestions from anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting those minutes from July 15 and 22nd as presented, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. One of the select board members is not here this evening. Mr. Skoll is going to miss this meeting. Next matter on the agenda is chair's remarks. I guess I'll just note two things. First off, I'm going to very briefly comment on yesterday's skate park potential sites visit that we conducted with a series of people who are in favor of and against various sites and who want to see a skate park constructed, and select board members and other members of the administration and other members of the public. It seems pretty clear from sitting at or standing around and listening to people that there's quite a lot of controversy and quite a lot of acrimony about the skateboard park and where it's going to be. And we've known that for a long time, but it clearly spilled over yesterday. It almost seemed that it was going to come to blows at one point, but I was standing back. I think that Dave Skoll's comments at the end were very well taken, that we certainly hope that everybody can find common ground and reach a consensus position. Clearly, one of the factors that was not considered as part of the site selection committee criteria was the perceptions of neighbors about the adverse impact on their quality of life of having the park near their homes. And that's a factor that we as a select board need to look at and try to deal with, among with all other factors. It's very complicated given the issues we're facing. Maybe it'll be on the next agenda. Maybe it'll be on the agenda after that. I don't really know how the board wants to proceed with that. But it is our intention to move this along as quickly as possible. The other thing I would note is that as I got ready for today's meeting, I seem to recall that the select board used to take every other meeting off in the summer. But it does not appear that we're doing that this year. There's just too much to be done. So we're meeting right through the summer, although the result is that we have only 4 members from time to time at meetings. I know it'll be that way at our next meeting as well. Those are my comments for the night. Next matter on the agenda is the town manager's comments.
Thank you, David. There has been an awful lot of, I would say, good news in the area of economic development recently. And I'd just like to take a moment and add to that. We were notified recently that, the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation was notified recently that the EDA has approved the SEDS plan for the Wyndham region, which is a really good thing in terms of economic development planning moving forward. But there are also some other benefits that are, I would say, far more immediate and accrue to each of the towns in the 27 towns of the Wyndham region. So that would certainly include Brattleboro. And that is that we are now eligible applicants to a couple of different grant programs for the EDA that they have, one of which is called Public Works and the other of which is called Economic Adjustment. These are grant programs. From what I understand from last year, the average grant awarded, it's a competitive program, but the average grant awarded was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.7 million. These two programs provide investment dollars for public infrastructure in support of economic development goals and for planning and other assistance. So I have asked the folks at BDCC to take the time and to let each of the towns know that they're now eligible applicants for this pool of resources, along with all the institutions of higher education. So it's a positive thing, and look forward to seeing what the region can do with it.
I forgot right at the beginning of the agenda that we may want to reorder the agenda to the extent that the planning director is here only for item C, which is the zoning ordinance amendment, and then item I, which is the Entergy Settlement Funds Working Group. I'd like to put those two items together if there's no objection to that. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
All right, so if that's the only reason that Rod is here, we'll have the Entergy Settlement Funds Working Group item after the zoning ordinance amendment consideration for the Red Clover Commons PUD. Next item on the agenda is Select Board comments, committee reports.
Police Fire Committee, I'm not sure when we're going to meet next, or so that's still up in the air. I look forward to at least getting back at the table and seeing where this is going to go. Do you have any insight there?
I know that the chiefs have been struggling. The combined facility down on Elliott Street is proving to be a little more challenging than perhaps at first it was envisioned. Continue to plug away, and would like to think that we've got some series of issues to discuss and consider at the committee level, probably within the next few weeks.
So that's what we're waiting for. Is that yeah? Okay, that's all I have.
Anybody else?
Well, I can just report that what's coming up on the agenda is the Entergy Settlement Funds Working Group, and we had our first meeting, but when Rod gets here, we'll talk more about that.
And the Town Arts Committee met today. We're keeping Rod very busy because he joined us for an hour of our meeting, and we had a very focused and productive conversation about how to move forward on really capitalizing on the arts in Brattleboro, and specifically looked at the Core Arts Project, which has completed phase 2, and the findings will come out within 8 weeks' time, and then we'll take a look at those findings and move forward on phase 3 of the project, which is choosing an artist to do a community art project in town. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of energy on the Arts Committee right now. It feels like there's a lot of forward momentum and a really beautiful balance of philosophical discussion and action steps. So it's in a wonderful place, and I look forward to reporting out once we have those findings.
David, just one more quick thing. Is there any update on Brooks House, on anything that the public should know, or how we're moving along?
Brooks House?
I can. Yeah, if there was just... A couple people have asked me this week, and I was just wondering if we had anything.
Helping to promote the reopening of the Brooks House is one of the items that potentially is on the goals list.
Right.
Whether it'll stay there in that form, I don't know, because Kate had some additional information after our last meeting. So, Kate?
Well, do you want to know, like...
Well, I'm just wondering how the status is, how
Yeah.
if things are moving along as planned, or are we behind or ahead? Or?
Well, I can tell you from the VTC, Vermont Technical College, and the Community College of Vermont are moving in this week. In fact, one of them, the furniture was in, what's today, Tuesday? I think the furniture moved in on Friday, and Vermont Tech, or one of them was coming in either yesterday, today, and the other is coming in at the end of the week.
Now, what sections do they have?
They're in the back.
The back, okay.
And I don't know if anybody, so they're going to be in this week, and I don't know if anybody's been around the back of it, but Harmony Lot is looking
better.
a lot better, and they're putting the thing down. I don't know when the storefronts are still,
right.
That sort of was set aside so they can get BTC and Vermont Tech, so they're going to be soon 400 more people at any given time downtown.
Great. It's good.
And in fact, you did say after our last meeting that the development group at the Brooks House is planning a large reopening event.
They're going to plan an event in the downtown merchants we'll be planning something in conjunction with their event. I don't want to get ahead of myself and say stuff, but
Excellent. So yes, things are planned
Things
in
are-
terms
things
of
are
the
planned,
reopening
yeah.
Yeah, I was just-
of the Brooks House. The Traffic Safety Committee met last week or the week before that, and I'd like to just speak briefly about the steps that are being taken in response to some significant traffic safety concerns, including some pedestrian fatalities that we've had over the course of the last 1, 2, 3 years. The Traffic Safety Committee has been taking some steps to try to formalize processes to respond to traffic safety concerns. And so we've developed a traffic calming plan, which includes a specific tool that people can use for submitting their concerns. And so we begin our traffic safety committees once a month. I think it's the third Tuesday of the month, addressing specific concerns that have been raised. We've also begun surveying and gathering speed data and traffic count related information using Wyndham Regional Commission speed gathering equipment and speed data gathering equipment. And so it's been set out, that equipment, in a number of locations around town over the course of the last 2 months. One of the locations where the speed tubes were set out was on Putney Road between Bradley Ave and the bridge, going northbound and southbound. And it should come as no surprise to anybody, but one of the findings that was made is that the average speed out there on Putney Road is higher than the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't have the exact speed number here, but the average speed was somewhere between 33 and 38 miles per hour. And so there is some decision that we're going to have to be making and thinking about in terms of whether we want to leave the speed limit there as something that's unrealistic at 25 miles an hour, when in fact people move more quickly. My understanding from listening to the Wyndham Regional Commission traffic expert is that generally one would set speed limits to the 85th percentile, which is that if you measure all the traffic that's going past, you set the speed limit around the 85th highest percent vehicle, taking into consideration other factors like crash data and pedestrian data and the like.
can I just ask a
Yeah.
question? Which way is that going?
I believe it was both directions.
Okay, because this is a little thing that I've always been forgetting to mention. When you're coming down Putney Road into town, the 25 mile per hour speed limit sign, you can't see it when it turns to 25 because there's a big bush or tree in front of it. And I don't know, it goes from 40, then you get down to the marina, it goes 30, but you don't see the 25 mile per hour sign after you go over the bridge. I mean, not that, but you don't see it until you're either pulled over or you're down by the common. That's just a little observation.
Right. At present, the 85th percentile up there is 38 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So having a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit may not be particularly realistic, but it's something that we want to look at over time.
But isn't all of in town 25 miles an hour? I thought it was.
Well, but Putney Road moves up to 30.
Right, but, well, Putney Road, I don't consider in town.
Right, and the same with Route 9 is
Right.
30 miles an hour.
Right.
So
But in town, I do believe it's
that's
25.
correct. That's correct.
Whether it's posted or not. I mean, it's,
That is correct.
okay.
So that's something we need to look at going forward, but it's something that we've been looking at, trying to deal with various hotspots in town in order to determine what factors are in play with respect to traffic safety. Next matter on the agenda is public participation. Is there anybody who's here to speak to an issue that is not on the agenda?
Are you here?
Mr. Cannon.
I got several.
That microphone is for the television.
Oh,
No, use it. Use it so when it's on the TV, people can hear you, Mr.
We
Cannon.
had a little incident on Clark Street, and I had tried to follow up on it, and apparently I keep getting, I don't know, I don't care. This happened, black car come up Clark Street the wrong way, came across my front lawn and down to the Lawrence block. I had called the police department and asked them about it and told them about it, and all they wanted to say to me was, "We don't want to deal with you, Mr. Cannon. What's your problem? We'll get to you as soon as possible." So I waited 4.5 hours after I came down to the police station and had to holler and scream about it. So then we decided, me and my wife Kathleen Cannon went to the town manager's office. But apparently the town manager didn't want to deal with us either. And I want to know why, how come when Kathleen Cannon and Paul Cannon wants to talk to the town manager, he's not available? Oh no, he'll call a couple days later and double talk everything. Can I get any information on this, why this happens? Oh, I know, Gunny says, well, you know, we could have done this a little bit better, but our officers didn't do nothing wrong. But don't worry about it. So let's deal with the drug business on Clark Street. He says, we want to hear about this. So now it's coming out of 125 Canal Street into 101 Clark Street. Okay, this is going on. This is Grand Central Station through both these buildings here. Call the cops. Well, you know, Mr. Cannon, we're busy. We don't want to deal with it right now. We'll get to you whenever we can. Well, as far as I know, when you ask for an officer to come to the situation, they should show up, right? Isn't that what the taxpayers paid for, is for this to happen? I know what the question is. Well, Andy Shapiro knows. As long as the state pays the state pays their tenants his Section 8 money, he don't care what goes on at 101 Clark Street. So apparently he don't care, and he keeps telling me the cops don't care. I asked the cops how come they don't care. Oh, I know what it is. We'll arrest them today at 4 o'clock, and at 4:15 or 4:30, they're out back on the street, and nobody gives a shit. But in my opinion, I care. I live on Clark Street, so what do I got to do so the cops will come and deal with the situation before it gets so far out of hand that there's a gunfight on Clark Street or a knife fight again? Don't forget, we've had this on 101 Clark Street before, the knife business, where that guy got stabbed at 101. Is that what it's going to take for the select board to deal with this problem?
Mr. Cannon, I want to thank you for expressing your concerns. We will follow up on the issue, and
I want to know why when we
Mr.
called
Cannon,
the town manager's office and we wouldn't see this lady right here. We said, me and my wife wanted to make an appointment to see the town manager. Oh, well, he's busy right now. So I said, well, that's fine. Set us an appointment to see him. How many times did my wife call?
Mr. Cannon,
I just wanna know.
Mr. Cannon, I respectfully listen to you without
Yeah.
interrupting you. I'll ask you please to do the same with me.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right? I understand you've got some concerns
Yeah.
about your interactions with law enforcement and your interactions with the town manager's office.
Yep.
We will look into the issue,
Yep.
but I don't have any sort of a response to give you for right now. So I thank you for expressing your concerns. But
okay.
Mr. Cannon, there's nothing further to be said right now.
So
We
when I
will look
paint a
into
big
it.
sign on my building, on my house, or put a big sign up on my front lawn that says crack dealing, 101 Clark Street, 125, the town can't do nothing about it, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Anybody else want to speak during public participation? All right, next matter on the agenda is unfinished business, holidays observed. So, must be 4 months ago that we had a discussion about whether we would recognize Martin Luther King Day as an official town holiday. And my recollection is that most everybody on the board was in favor of proceeding that way, but that we asked the town manager to respond back to us about how we would put that in place given our current employee handbook and days off and collective bargaining agreements. So Patrick has now written something up, and Patrick, if you can speak to us a little bit about how we would implement adopting Martin Luther King Day, if that's what the board decides to do as a holiday.
Well, sure. If the board wanted to adopt Martin Luther King Day as a holiday, in effect, what I've tried to point out here is that there are two different, excuse me, there are two different groups of employees that would be affected in different ways. At the present time, the non-unionized employees would be affected directly by the board adopting a change to the list of official holidays. However, for the union employees, and this includes the police department union, the fire department union, and the steelworkers union, which covers a mix of employees between Parks and Rec and the Department of Public Works, the actual list of holidays has been incorporated into the collective bargaining agreement. So in order for any change that the board wishes to make to occur in each of those agreements, we would have to re-enter either reopen those collective bargaining agreements or take the issue up at the next opportunity once the contracts expire. If the board wished to change the official list of holidays in our personnel policies, which is certainly available to you, if the goal was to find a suitable substitute such that we weren't adding or diminishing the number of holidays, I've identified two that are potential, and primarily what makes these two somewhat similar to each other is that neither day is an actual holiday, in that, you know, it's not Christmas or Thanksgiving, it's the day after Thanksgiving, or in the event of the two half-days, one on Christmas Eve and one on New Year's Eve, neither of them are actual holidays as well. They're holidays of convenience. I know they're appreciated by the staff, and I don't think either one, I don't think the staff would desire losing either one, but I think those are the options available to you. Are there any questions that you have?
The only question I have is it a long process if they have to go before the union to get this ratified, or is it something that comes, like you were saying, does it come up at their, you know, when we renegotiate your contract, or?
I would think that probably the most reasonable approach would be to incorporate it into the negotiations for the next contract.
So,
in many real ways, the list of holidays for the fire department, the police department,
are the same.
and, you know, those folks work holidays. They
Right.
work 4th of July, they work Christmas,
Right.
they work New Year's. They're a 24/7 operation. So the list of holidays is certainly a benefit, but if it's in your schedule and it's Christmas, that's just how it rolls.
So we, at this point, there are not a lot of non-union employees at this point, are there?
Oh, I think excluding management, I think it's 24, 25
Out of 135?
out of 135, roughly.
Anybody else on the board? Jan?
I would like to speak, coming from an employee's
That's-
point of view.
That's what I'd like to
This
hear.
argument first started with parking tickets were issued on Martin Luther King Day. They are not. That's an incorrect statement. So then to take it further is we're taking an argument further with incorrect data to begin with.
Okay.
Taking the Friday after Thursday, after Thanksgiving, is taking a 4-day weekend away from employees that is spent with friends and family. A half day here and a half day there for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve is also not popular among employees. I will again, if we're honoring Martin Luther King, I would again open the discussion up to honoring all of the men and women who work for civil rights, human rights, equal rights, and the select board could make a proclamation proclaiming the second Monday in October
You've thought about this.
to be Human Rights Day, Civil Rights Day, and that would in fact honor all of the men and women working for those rights. It would not take away from any employees. If we decided to make Columbus Day a working day, parking enforcement would be working on Columbus Day and could very well be writing tickets. So moving these holidays around, I think, is very problematic.
I think, another point, just to add to the discussion, from what I understand in past years, that several of these half-day holidays were offered to staff in lieu of pay increases that were not going to occur on those years. So I think that's how we ended up with some of these.
Okay.
I mean, I get what you say. I disagree, though, with renaming Columbus Day a different day. I think Martin Luther King Day was established by the federal government for a reason, you know what I mean, to honor Martin Luther King. So I'm not for us doing another holiday on our own. And that's just how I feel on that. I don't think we should do another holiday. I think we need to either do Martin Luther King Day or not do Martin Luther King Day. I mean, to me, I'm for doing Martin Luther King Day. So to me, it's what do we switch out? I mean, that's where I am.
You say right now?
What I'd like to say right now, and I believe we touched upon it, I don't think we had a thorough and full discussion, and my apologies for not having a better memory, but I guess I'm sitting with and wanting to know what would be the fiscal ramifications and the inner workings of the town ramifications of adding an additional holiday. I really don't like the idea of making decisions for the employees of the town about how they spend off time. I also really am in support of this acknowledging Martin Luther King Day. And I realize that that's a question that may not be answerable right now, but I also think there are very few holidays for town employees, and it seems to me like if it were possible to add another one, that would be something that I would be in favor of.
Could certainly sit down with John and talk a little bit and come back with what the ramifications of that would be.
Are Columbus Day and Veterans Day holidays that are observed by the state? I know that Columbus Day,
Yes.
Columbus Day was a floating holiday.
right.
I don't think it's a
Schools.
floating holiday anymore. And I know that the Brattleboro, the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union
Is open.
has school
Right, they do.
on Columbus Day. So.
Because they traded it for something.
Right.
Yeah.
So it could be that Columbus Day is properly swapped out for Martin Luther King Day. I just don't recall whether I, as a state employee, get Veterans Day off or not.
I think you do.
I just don't remember.
Right.
But certainly Columbus Day, I know the schools
I know the
are in
schools did.
session, and I'm pretty sure that Columbus Day was a floating holiday, and I'm not sure if it is anymore. So that's not on the list that Patrick prepared, but it could be that we need to consider swapping out Columbus Day as well for Martin Luther King Day. You want to ask Patrick to look at financial ramifications of either having another
Okay, holiday.
town holiday on Martin Luther King Day, or the financial ramifications of swapping out Martin Luther King Day for either Columbus Day or the Friday after Thanksgiving.
And would you like me to bring back verification of state holidays?
Yes, please. Any other questions from the board?
No, I'm just not in favor of swapping out for the day after Thanksgiving. I agree with Jan on that it's a good family day. And, I can see the Columbus Day because I know the school district did it. And so, I would go that route, absolutely.
I don't know, is Columbus even federal?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
I think it used to be.
I can bring back, here are the list of federal holidays, here's the
Yeah,
list of state holidays, here's the ramifications financially of adding a day.
Let's, and let's please have all of that for the next meeting.
Yep.
At the second August meeting.
Yeah.
Because I don't see there's any reason for delay.
Agreed.
Sir?
My name is Richard Evers. I live in Brattleboro. The questions about financial are a segue into what I wanted to say this evening on the issue. I wrote a letter to the editor, to the paper, back when I heard about this issue back in March, when I think it was brought to your attention first. And when I wrote my letter, I didn't realize that there might be a swap for holidays with no net cost to the town. But so I was under the assumption that it would be adding a holiday, and I did a little research, not very extensive, but I went to the town manager's office and I asked what would it cost for a day's holiday for town employees and for parking receipts. And I wrote a letter that was published in the Reformer. My title for the letter was called Whose Holiday? And the Reformer retitled it, Where's the Logic? So I would like to read that as a just as part of your thinking process when you're deciding this issue, just to have maybe another perspective. To the editor, your front page headline story, Should Brattleboro Recognize Martin Luther King Day, March 26th, begins as follows. It happens every year as customers walk into Nancy Browse's bookstore, Everyone's Books, on Martin Luther King Day and ask if they have to feed the parking meters. Browse bristles at the answer she has to give. It continues, that is the front page story in the Reformer, quote, I am mortified to tell my customers that Martin Luther King Day is not recognized by the town of Brattleboro, Browse said. People from out of town can't believe it, unquote. The article then goes on to say that she is petitioning the Select Board to have Brattleboro recognize the holiday. Someone help me out here, because something seems seriously wrong with this picture. She wants Brattleboro, which is already fiscally challenged, to put it mildly, to give its 180 employees another paid holiday at a cost, according to the town, of $14,373, plus foregoing all parking revenues for a day, nearly another $2,000, while her store stays open for business, presumably to make a profit. Where's the logic in that? It appears she wants us as a town to take a big financial hit, while for her it's business as usual, maybe even better, because free parking will probably result in more customers. Maybe she should choose instead to close her store that day, give her employees a paid holiday, and urge her fellow merchants to do the same, rather than pointing her finger at the town, which is already deep in the hole and scrounging for every dollar it can raise or save. Look, I've shopped at Everyone's Books for years and plan to continue to choose it over Amazon. It's a great old-fashioned bookstore, like Brown & Roberts is a great old-fashioned hardware store, and a vital part of our town. Leading by example instead of by accusation could be a win-win for Nancy. She would be paying, no pun intended, her respects to Dr. King's memory, as well as sparing herself any further mortification from disappointed shoppers who, for some strange reason, appear to conflate MLK's magnificent sacrificial achievement with getting a personal little freebie. Instead of grousing about free parking, maybe they, the customers, might look for another way to remember him, one that would stress the public good, parenthesis, like helping low and fixed income Brattleboro homeowners facing frightening property tax increases pay their bills and keep their homes. I would urge the Select Board to think long and hard before ripping up another plank from an already leaky ship. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cannon, you had your hand up?
Yeah, this
Microphone. Microphone.
The Martin Luther King Day should be, if it's a holiday, should be only a holiday, and nobody else should make another day for a holiday. So if we're gonna do that, why don't we have 2 Christmases, 2 Easters? Why don't we just split it up for every holiday that the state has? Why don't we just have 2? So that the taxpayers can pay for everything else. I think if it's Martin Luther King Day, it should be honored. The town should stop the meters from running and let the people come into this town and not pay for the meters. That would be the thing to do. Not worry about if the cops are gonna get their paychecks, or anybody else, or the fire department getting their paychecks, or anybody else. How about the town employees that are worried about their paychecks? I think we should just leave it alone and keep it the way it is. And I think that's a hell of a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Any other comments? So Patrick, you'll have information back for us for the next meeting.
Will do.
Thank you. Next matter on the agenda is financial report.
My favorite part of it.
Mr. O'Connor,
Thank you, David.
how are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to see you.
Included in the packet is the financial statements for the fiscal year 14 as of the end of July. And we have one more month to go until we can finalize the financials for the year. But I thought I'd give you an update on where we stood as of the end of July. And there's a summary before the financials that I've put together to give you some idea on where we stand. And as you can see, we budgeted no surplus or deficit for the year. And looking at all the major variances that we've encountered this year, we have a preliminary deficit of $461,922. And that breaks down pretty interestingly. We have the unassigned fund balance, which is the one that we're most concerned about. And we started the year with an unassigned fund balance of $1,712,852. And at the end of July, that fund balance was up to $2,162,567, an increase of $499,715. The committed fund balance dropped from $872,000 to $290,000. And that $290,000 that's committed is the $200,000 that you committed to help offset fiscal year 15's budget, and the $90,000 is the remainder for the monies that were earmarked for Tropical Storm Irene related expenses. The non-spendable fund balance, which is things like prepayments and inventory, things of that nature, dropped from $665,000 down to $336,000. And that big drop is due to the fact that in fiscal year 13, we prepaid the passive insurance payments to VLCT. And we did not do that in fiscal 14. So that's why at the bottom, I take that $449,000 that we're seeing the unassigned fund balance go up, and I'll take away the passive payments to put it on a consistent basis, and you can see that the unassigned fund balance, once it's adjusted for those payments, would go up about $76,000 as of the end of July. And so it's going up by $76,000 in spite of the fact that we took $200,000 out of the budget to help next year's budget. So we're in good shape. I expect that $76,000, frankly, to get larger by the end of August. We're doing very well on our delinquent taxes. Last year we had to defer $500,000 in delinquent taxes, and we're down as of the end of July to about $350,000. So that could go up by whatever that difference is between those 2 years. So again, that's
This is what I like listening to you. This is good. This is
only
really
good news for you, John.
This is really good.
So we're looking good. I think we're going to have a good year this year, and I feel very positive about that. So, any questions?
So we could end up with a better unassigned fund balance.
Yes, yes,
And not by much, but because we only have another month to go.
right.
And we shouldn't assume that our budget conversations will be a piece of cake.
That's
But
true,
it is
Donna.
good to hear some good news.
That's
Yeah.
good news. That's,
No, for sure, we're committed to wage increases this year, just like last year, and other fixed
Oh, yeah.
cost increases. So struggling to keep a minimal tax increase will be a difficult step as well. It looks to me, John, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some of the cost-saving efforts that we pursued that are paying dividends. So our tipping fees are down about $50,000. Was it 50 or 30?
30.
Down $30,000 from the budgeted amount. Street light costs are down $50,000. So those are really efforts that we've made to transition out the street lights and go to more energy efficient lights, and to focus more on recycling and composting. So we're saving money in those two areas, $80,000. And then we have cost savings in risk management and benefits as well. Those are pretty significant items as well.
and that could even get better with, the implementation, pay as you throw, and then how we restructure all that. And so,
But some of this other money, for example, the $30,000 in planning, Rod, I'm correct that that's just for the consultant and that's carrying over. It's going to be spent this year rather than last?
That's correct.
All right. What's a good fiscal
It
picture? I
is.
mean,
It's-
the deficit is because of the wording of the article to take money out of the capital fund for the 2013 budget. And really, other than that, we're in the black, probably about $300,000.
Yep.
Good. Patrick?
Minor clarification, but I don't think the $30,000 for planning, I think that exists due to the timing of the hiring of the consultant, but it doesn't necessarily carry forward. At the conclusion of the fiscal year, it becomes part of the fund balance.
Yep.
The decision to carry forward means May.
Well,
Well, did we budget properly for the consultant for this coming year? Do we need to increase that line item when we do the contract? Think about that and let us know when the time comes. Because I saw that was for the consultant.
Yep.
When I was reviewing it today. All right. Any other questions from anybody on the board about the year-end financials? I note that we don't yet have the last installment on the rooms and meals,
That will come in late August, early September.
and that'll show in last
That'll
year's
show.
in the final
Show as
budget.
well.
Good. Anybody else? Anybody else who's in attendance have any questions about the budget? Excellent. Well, that's good news. Thank you.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is renewing the agreement for the Living Memorial Park Snow Sports, Inc. Hi, Ms. Carroll.
Good evening. Here with me this evening is Jake Dixon, a representative of Snow Sports, Inc., LMPSS, to make it easy for you all. Jake and I were just discussing how long that this contract, we've had renewing contracts. They've been a volunteer organization for over 17 years. And they're here again this evening to enter into another 4-year contract with the town to continue operations of the Living Memorial Park ski tow. 100% volunteer organization, which includes many times around-the-clock snowmaking, so that they can ensure some great skiing. I'm not going to take Jake's wind out of her sail here, so I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
My only comment would be that it's a great boon to this community, I think, and we've enjoyed wonderful success. We keep growing. We still charge $5 a ticket, which I think you will recognize in today's world is quite the unusual thing. We keep a lot of kids active all weekend long. We work with high school students who serve as community service volunteers. They earn credits at the high school for their help. It's just a very good community organization.
oh, it's wonderful.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jake, there were some lean years there for a while, weren't there? And now I've noticed in the past 4 or 5 years that it's really rebounded
One of the big things,
incredibly.
I think, is that we have gotten our snowmaking
Right.
better. We're not perfect yet, but we're better at it. And we have, Carol alluded to the fact that snowmaking sometimes can go on round the clock, and that's true. That's a hard mission to get anyone to sign up for, but we seem to have some loyal volunteers who are
Right.
willing to do that. So that, and also the fact that I think the public has responded more and more. We have skiing and we have snowboarding. We also occasionally have the cross-country team from the high school and other cross-country skiers show up. So it serves a lot of different
Yeah.
people.
I tell you, both my boys learned there, and it was a wonderful asset. So I hope we can keep it going.
Well, I hope so too.
Yeah.
If you'd like to renew the agreement for us, we'll be happy to go at it for another 4 years.
The agreement, I take it, has been reviewed by town attorney?
Yes, it has.
This insurance provision means that we pay for the insurance as a town for the organization as there being an additional insured on the VLCT contract? So it
Yes,
says
I believe,
paragraph 9
I believe that is correct.
All right, cool. Any other questions or comments?
No, I was just going to make a motion.
Anybody who's in attendance have any comments or questions? John?
To approve a 4-year contract with Living Memorial Park Snow Sports, Inc. for funding, operating, and maintenance of the Living Memorial Park ski area.
We have a motion to approve the contract with Living Memorial Park Snow Sports, Inc. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Jake, thank you for your time there.
Carol, you have anything else on the agenda?
I do not.
Excellent. Thanks. Next matter on the agenda is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment for Red Clover Commons.
I'm a loser.
Mr. Real, are you there at the table on your own?
Nobody likes, oh,
Okay.
I've got one friend.
Mr. Francis?
Look at the size of it.
Yep.
Got any questions, John?
No, none, not a word.
All right then. So, do you think, Rod, that we should start with you explaining the PUD process, or with Mr. Realock explaining what BHA wants to propose?
Depends on how valuable your time is. If you want to just cut to the chase, Mr. Wheelock would be fine up first.
Yes.
Or if the board's feeling is that they're so foggy on the process that's before them, then I can give you a thumbnail sketch of Section 5400.
We'll ask you to do that afterwards. Mr. Realock?
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm the vice chair of the Board of Commissioners for Brattleboro Housing Authority. Our chair is unable to make it tonight, so I'll be doing the talking. As everybody in town knows, when Irene came through, Melrose Terrace took a beating, and we have been informed by HUD and our own common sense that that is no longer good housing for people who are aged and or disabled. So we're in the process, we've been allowed to continue to house them there by HUD for a period of time until we can come up with a replacement. We're looking to construct 55 units of housing for those people, which will still leave us with 25, but 55 good units 464 Canal Street, with the name of Red Clover Commons. We've been through the DRB concept hearing. The Planning Commission reviewed that and had comments. We've been through the preliminary plat hearing with the Development Review Board, and the Planning Commission reviewed their findings, and they are recommending to the Select Board that the proposed PUD, Planned Unit Development, be authorized by the Select Board so that we can go back to the DRB for a final decision on it. Basically, they said that they found that the proposed PUD fits into the goals and policies contained in the Brattleboro Town Plan, adopted February 19th, 2013. Which one of the goals and policies is, well, one of the policies is to direct any new residential development to areas that are where services are readily available and efficient and cost-effective. Deployment is most likely. Avoid adding residential development in areas vulnerable to natural hazards such as flooding and/or limited access. The policy also encourages residential development that promotes energy efficiency, universal design, i.e. designing residents so that they can be used by people of all abilities, and sustainable house building, and continue to support affordable housing for low and moderate income families. And the proposed amendment they found was compatible with the proposed future land uses and densities of the Brattleboro Town Plan. The PUD is located in an area designated as a neighborhood center. The purpose of this area is to transform existing commercial areas into high-density mixed-use settlements through infill development, and the proposed development provides infill housing at a higher density. So, we would request that you agree with the Planning Commission report, and that you would authorize that a planned unit development for the Red Clover project.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Marshall. Before we go any further, David, I can't recall whether when you opened this matter, you opened the public hearing for the...
Not
hearing.
formally.
So at some point you're going to want to do that if that's the direction you want to go in. Do you have to go through the process of announcing that you're now in a public hearing?
Yes, I understand that. I didn't know that, but I understand it now that you say it.
Yeah.
All right.
We just sort of wandered into this. It's okay. I mean,
we did. We did. And so a formal public hearing is necessary for amendment of the PUD, and so I do open the public hearing on amendment of the PUD, and we'll take, Mr. Wheelock, your comments explaining the request by Red Clover Commons as having been made during the public hearing.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Late save.
Thanks for telling me.
Do you have any questions? I will do my best to field them. Mr. Francis May, our Chris Hart is here. She can probably answer anything I can.
I'm wondering whether what is the entity that will be owner of this property if it's constructed? Is it going to be called Red Clover Commons, or will it be Brattleboro Housing Authority?
It'll be called Red Clover Commons.
Does Red Clover Commons currently exist and have an interest yet? Does it own that property where this development would occur?
No, we do not.
What's the time frame and the plan for that?
First of all, we're not going to purchase the property, or the property will not be purchased until we get a final decision from the DRB. Okay? And it's being developed in a partnership between Housing Vermont and Brattleboro Housing Authority. There'll be a separate entity set up to handle that.
I think that I saw today for the first time the Act 250 permit application. Did that go in like today?
I'm not sure when that was filed. Do you know, Chris?
It hasn't gone in yet, but we anticipate filing it this week.
Okay, so the Act 250 permit application has not yet been filed.
No.
Rod, can you explain just a little bit about the procedure in terms of not the long version, just the short version, where we stand along this process, what other permits would be necessary, what impact, if any, the ownership of the property has, the applicant's ownership of the property might have on the process?
Okay. Well, I must say I'm quietly pleased that Mr. Wheelock was referring to this diagram which you have in your packet to figure out where we are in the process. So this is a flowchart that's been moderately modified from the town plan, and what it does is step you through the planning development of PUD approval process. We are now just short of this diamond at the bottom, which is select board adoption of the zoning amendment that's required to bring the planned unit development into existence. So typically in the Brattleboro zoning ordinance process for planned unit development, there is a series of steps intended to do two things. One is review the actual built form of the proposed project and review it against subdivision regulations and other criteria that are contained in the zoning ordinance, including standard site plan review procedures. That part has been done primarily by the Development Review Board in the concept approval process and then the preliminary plat process, which is a process typically undertaken as part of a subdivision process. In this instance, we know that it's a single parcel and no subdivision was involved. Nevertheless, the documentation of the project can be thought of as conforming to that requirement. In between each of those two steps from the DRB, the Planning Commission has commented on the evolving plans from the applicant. The Select Board was introduced to the Red Clover Commons project informally some time ago. The ownership status of the parcel now and in its final form is of interest to the Select Board potentially, but not determinant of any particular outcome. So it can be customary, well, at least thought of as customary, that a potential developer or owner would approach a seller and say, my purchase of this parcel is contingent on me obtaining all necessary permits. And so if I understand the Brattleboro Housing Authority, Housing Vermont joint venture here called Red Clover Commons, they are in a process of obtaining all the necessary state and local permits, and they're at the point where they're going to get the big state permit, which is the Act 250 permit, and they would need the zoning amendment as part of the PUD process here. I'm assuming, I'm not party to their negotiations, but I'm assuming that they have a purchase and sale agreement in place and it's contingent upon them being able to establish that they have all necessary permits. Am I?
We're in the process.
Right. So, for the Select Board to make its decision, you have before you a summary of the Planning Commission's report, which has reviewed the application with reference to the town plan. And the Planning Commission has found the application is in conformance with the town plan. At each step of the process, the DRB has been able to issue permits on the basis of the submitted designs and testimony of the applicants and their representatives. And so this component of the process is the process whereby the Select Board is involved in making an amendment to the zoning ordinance, because in Brattleboro the PUD process also, at this point in our history, requires a zoning amendment which will be permanently contained in the zoning ordinance, and the final details, if you like, of the development will be encoded in the language of the PUD. Sometimes, in addition to that, the Select Board enters into a development agreement with the developer and subsequent owner of the property, and that would cover issues associated with who's going to bear the cost and responsibility of the eventual build out and development of an area. So think more along the lines of a subdivision. If a road is going to be built, will it be built for town standards? If it's built to town standards, the town will accept it. If it's not, it won't. Those kinds of conditions. I don't believe that there are terribly many attributes of this project that fall into the category of needing a development agreement. However, the Select Board may choose to establish more clearly and carefully the exact nature of the ongoing relationship between the property owners and the project.
I want to get back to that in a minute, but I guess I have two other quick questions. Well, one other quick question first. The primary ways in which this development would not conform with the zoning ordinance appears to be the density, because it's 55 units on a very small parcel, and then it's residential in a commercial area.
We have,
fair to say?
Yes. So in the existing use table of the zoning ordinance in commercial districts, there's a maximum of 8 residential units for a commercial site, for a commercial parcel, and clearly this exceeds 8. So that is why the applicants chose to utilize the PUD process to advance the application. That's in recognition of our zoning ordinance not really having clear standards that would address the construction of large apartment blocks, which is effectively what this is.
I have another set of concerns, but I want to defer to anybody on the board first. So anybody else on the board?
Well, no, the only question I have, so the change in the zoning district is just applicable to that
parcel.
That parcel.
Yes.
So it's not changing our whole scope of
No.
of how we do PUDs in town, or.
This one's not doing that, no. We'll be back very soon.
But we're going to come back to this.
Right. With a brand new zoning.
Because we have to.
With a brand new zoning ordinance that will change the PUD process, we hope, and you'll get to review that.
Other questions from anybody on the board?
Well, let me just clarify an important point here. What the PUD process in Brattleboro allows for is a change of use as well as changing dimensional standards. So, for instance, the density question is what you might think of as a dimensional question.
Right.
So, how many units, or how close to the fence line, or whatever, or to the property line, however you want to frame it. In Brattleboro zoning ordinance currently, an applicant can use the PUD process to change the use of that parcel, and they're doing that because they're going through the full rigors of a zoning amendment. In other communities, the way they resolve that is that a PUD process is not available to change the use. It's simply a measure to change the dimensional standards. Right? So you can't switch from industrial to residential. It's either industrial or residential. And then you say, you know, there's some unique features to this parcel that means that it's very difficult for me to meet your standards. How about I show you a really good plan that just doesn't happen to meet your standards, and that would be the PUD route. But there's no, I don't want to use this for industrial, I want to use it for residential. Let's switch it. That's really a function here of the PUD process. Now, in this particular example, there's residential, this parcel is sort of sandwiched between traditional strip development on Canal Street and an established residential neighborhood immediately behind it. It's the one parcel between commercial strip development and a residential neighborhood. So,
It's a unique spot.
It's fairly unique, and it also doesn't present that much of a conflict in that because of that. Right. And we have identified this neighborhood in the town plan as an area that we want to develop as a neighborhood center. And the proximity to the hospital and to the ambulance depot and a whole bunch of other services is a really good fit with this form of housing development.
Other questions or comments from the board?
You're on.
Well, some of the documents that were included with the materials that we got have to do with the disposition of Melrose. And I'm not satisfied with the language that we've got relating to the disposition of Melrose at this point. and I'm not really in favor of moving forward with the approval of the PUD until there's better language relating to the disposition of Melrose. There was a July 28th letter from the Housing Authority indicating that there are some possible future scenarios under which this site, being Melrose, could become a burden to the town. And none of those are supported by the Housing Authority Commissioners, and that they would work closely in concert with the town to ensure the best use of Melrose going forward. That was sort of clarified on the 29th in a letter that sort to explain that language. But I'm sort of troubled by that language in there. Since the time that we first heard of Red Clover comments being proposed, have seen there be some connection between Red Clover Commons and Melrose, in that there's a transfer of the units and the HUD allocation, I guess, from Melrose over to Red Clover, as I understood it. And I think that this is a really, really excellent project. I am in favor of it. I think it's a solid use of that property, but I really think that it behooves the town to have better assurances about what's going to happen with Melrose and about the Housing Authority's ongoing responsibility for Melrose before we go ahead and grant a zoning amendment. And so I'd really like to have that issue clarified a little bit more. I don't know what the basis would be for a conclusion that Melrose would somehow become a burden to the town or to the community, but that is what's being presented to us by the Housing Authority in these letters, and I want to understand why that is, and I want to know that that's not going to happen, and that the Housing Authority is going to make sure that that's not happening. So I'd like to, I don't know if we can hear about that today,
Well,
but I want something formal about it before I'm comfortable moving forward.
Well, I wonder if anybody has an answer.
All I can say is that the Board of Commissioners is adamant that it will not become a problem for the town. It's really a very prized property out there. Well, I say prized. It's a really nice, attractive property. What our problem is, we're looking for non-residential uses for it. So we've got a planning process. I'm not really prepared to discuss that right at this point, but I think there was something said about coming back to the next meeting and on the 19th and discussing Melrose. But the Board of Commissioners will have the last say as far as the Housing Authority is concerned. We want something nice out of that. That's the legacy of the Housing Authority. There are still a lot of people that would like to live there, but we can't allow that. So that's where we're headed.
Well, the language of the letters that were presented, and once again, I think that this is a really great sounding project, Red Clover Commons. I thought it when it first presented, and I continue to believe that today. I see all the benefits of having this development in this location. But I really think that we need some clarification as to what burden Melrose could be and why it would be a burden that would impact the town. And I want really some sort of assurances that it's being dealt with in an appropriate way going in before we're just approving a zoning amendment for what appears to be a related project. That's a concern that I have at this point. I'd like to hear more about that before voting myself.
Yeah. I mean, I agree 100% that I love the project because I think it's a great project. We need it. I love the location, right by Walgreens. And on a bus route, everything's great. But when I had the same reaction that David did when I read the two letters, and it really did. I wonder too what burden to the town meant, like what the word burden meant. And so I read the letters, and I flipped through the thing, and I loved it. But then I got to these letters, and it's sort of, what does that sentence mean?
It means that there are scenarios when it could become a burden to the town. As I said, that's not the intent of the commissioners, and we are adamant that like I say, I'm not really prepared to discuss it in detail tonight, but there are any number of people who are major players in what happens there, and we're in the process of organizing a conference of all the people involved to come up with proposed uses that don't offend any of the major players.
I'm the one who wrote the letters for the commissioner, and I apologize if that was misleading. It was not meant to scare or spook the board or to lead the town in any way to think that
Chris,
commissioners...
you should use the microphone. Could you use the microphone?
Okay, I'm the one who wrote the letters for the board. Chris Hart, I'm the director of the Housing Authority, and I apologize if those letters, it appears that they did, created quite a lot of concern on the part of the select board and the town manager, and I apologize for that. What I was trying to convey on the part of the board was a conversation that the board had, and the board is here, and they can speak to it, in which they were saying what Marshall said. They adamantly do not want Melrose to in any way become burdensome to the town. Now, there was an article in the Commons in which I said one way this property, in fact, could become a burden to the town would be if the Housing Authority were to just take it, empty it out over the next 4 to 5 years, and then board up all the buildings and just sort of take care of it, but just leave it. That, I think, would be burdensome to the town. I think we would, as the owners of the property, have issues because we'd have 18 empty, boarded-up buildings there. And I believe that the Housing Authority would share in some little way that would impact the town. And I think that this board was trying to be honest with you in saying, we don't want to pursue any of those options where there might be collateral damage, if you will, that happens to the town. And that, to me, is probably a good example of one. We would be responsible for those basically deserted 18 buildings, but I'm not going to sit here and say that that would not impact your town services in some way. It would. I think that's just being honest and realistic and saying, on behalf of this board, that is absolutely what we do not want to see. We don't want Melrose in any way to be a burden to the town. And it's not, we don't want it to be a burden to us. Mm-hmm. The Housing Authority, and I'll let the board speak to it, really believes that this is a legacy project. This is a legacy that this Housing Authority is going to leave to the town and to the community. And I don't think that this board, and I know as the director, we have absolutely no intention of creating or leaving anything that is in any way a burden, in any way, to the town, with a small t, the community. We really see Melrose as a community resource, as something that the community of Brattleboro and West Brattleboro are very proud of. And we want to make sure that it's left, when it's no longer in the public housing domain, that it's not something that is detracting in any way. That's what that was all about, and I really apologize for all of the concern that it caused.
Chris, can a skate park go in there?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
I knew Rod would.
I don't know. I'm not the
No, you know, and the way I'm looking at this now is that, I mean, that is something that you couldn't answer one way or the other right now anyway, so I see where David and Kate are coming from. I'm just wondering what the benefit would be to, I'm just trying to understand what the benefit would be to hold this up or to I'm not sure what other information we can get, and that's where I'm just a little confused.
My concern at this point is that there's no information, that what I've gotten just now is a little bit more than what was in the letter.
Right.
But saying that the board doesn't want the buildings to be abandoned and just left to decay, for example, which is what I think was written up in the comments, and saying that the board is committed to working with the town going forward, is sort of an open-ended, vague response to a concern that's been articulated to the ultimate disposition of Melrose. And I think that the best interest of the town and protecting the interests of the town require at least some greater level of specificity, understanding what the burden can be, and understanding how the housing authority is going to act and is committed, not just wanting, but is committed to avoiding that negative impact. And my preference would be to have that issue fleshed out a little bit more before voting on the PUD. Others may not agree, but that's my view.
Well, all I can say is that it's not just a matter of wanting. I mean, again, I'm not going to speak for the board. The board is here. But the board is very committed to a good resolution all along what is possible with Melrose. And I agree with you. It is, at this point, it's an unknown. There are a lot of people. We have about 21 or 25 people that are from the technical, regulatory, and funding arms of the state and nonprofits that are convening in September to gather to talk with us about all their layers of regulations on Melrose and try to find a good path for that property. So, David, I would agree with you. It is very hard right now to sit here and say Melrose is going to be used for this, because we don't know that. We know some of the things that it can't be used for because of some of the regulations that have occurred since the tropical storm. We don't know all of the good possibilities that are out there, and we don't know what all these agencies and all of these funders and all of these representatives might come up with when we put them all in one room and say, we got to come up with a very, very good outcome for this property, for this town. And it can't be one that costs money in any way. It cannot cost the town money. It can't be a burden. It has to be a very positive outcome. So I agree with you. We don't know what that answer is now.
But it sounds like to me that you're not going to be able to have an answer for the next 6 months?
We won't have an answer.
I'm just guessing. I'm just, because you have to go through the whole process. And
September, October, yeah, I mean.
Rod, your thoughts?
I wanted to separate out two things here. One is, what are the ongoing legal responsibilities of a property owner, in Brattleboro and in the state of Vermont, and that's clearly established. And then, what are the possible directions of the planning process for the future of Melrose? And so we know it's a very complicated parcel of land. We know, I'm assuming the disposition has gone forward with HUD, that they've...
So we're finalized.
Right. So what that refers to is HUD's property interest in Melrose is coming to a close. If it works out the way you expect it to, then HUD will release themselves from any obligation or commitment to the operation and existence of Melrose Terrace. And in return for that, I'm assuming that they're going to move some of those resources, probably through another program, to Red Clover Commons,
Red Clover.
if that's what goes forward. The issue, I guess, and I don't want to speak for Chris or for the board, but the issue, I guess, that they're then confronted with is that they don't have a management arrangement that helps them sustain Melrose in any form at all, right? And so the question would be, they're now property owners of something which they're not able to earn an income on, and so it's still going to cost them money to have it, but they're not earning income from it. So that's a pretty basic problem. The sale value, the fair market value of the Melrose complex is a difficult question to arrive at because, first of all, it's a public housing development that was built in 1963 or thereabouts and is being well maintained, but is of a stature and a kind and an age that means that it's not readily marketable. And that's assuming that it's not in a district that's identified as being a special flood hazard area.
Flood hazard, yeah.
And the reason why the federal government is willing to relinquish their interest in it through HUD is that there's now an executive order and consolidated federal regulations which prevents them from spending any more federal money in a special flood hazard area. So any prospective buyer won't be able to use federal funds or federally backed funds, including a mortgage, to purchase the property because it's in a special flood hazard area. So any property buyer interested in Melrose as a complex for residential housing would have to have that much cash. And then work with Brian on a rolling 3-year basis to ensure that each and every unit does not exceed its appraised value on the day of the sale, such that it becomes deemed substantially improved or substantially damaged if it was subsequent to an event, which then means that they would be compelled, if they're going to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, to bring the property into conformance, which, while maybe theoretically possible in practical terms, is not possible because of the kind of construction of the buildings, which is that they're brick veneer and that they're, for the most part, below base flood elevation by anything between 3 feet and 6 inches, which means that you'd have to raise them to meet the minimum standards. And because they're made out of brick the way they are, you can't pick them up.
So in English, that means that property is very, very, very limited.
Your options are very limited.
You know, it's almost a green space.
And then, you know, to some extent, I mean, you know, that's part of the complexity even with dealing with HUD,
right,
in terms of what it is that it really is. So you move through that process, and that's all good. So you're now clear about the marketable potential of Melrose if it's to become empty, right? It's going to be difficult to sell as a residential property.
Right.
Right? Then you have about to start dealing with the Agency of Natural Resources and the various federal and state regulations concerning development in the special flood hazard area. So here we're thinking about alternate uses. And you're thinking also about the Brattleboro zoning ordinance. You can't build you can't build dwelling units in the floodway. You could have residential units in the flood fringe, the so-called special flood hazard area outside of the floodway. But they would need to meet special criteria, which would make them A, more costly to build, and B, you'd have to demolish what's there first. And so so then you've got, as a developer, you're confronting being below zero to start with because you have to remove what's there and then start over, compared to another site which is basically vacant. Maybe it's got trees on it, right? So that's the limited option. And then you have to deal with the Agency of Natural Resources and us to make sure that what you're proposing to do is going to work out okay. And that would add complexity and expense. And that's assuming that you've gotten past the State Historic Preservation Office, which now, because they're 50 years old, regards these as absolutely stunning examples of a form of architecture that's not known in Vermont, because it's not from Vermont, because there was off-the-shelf standard federal government plans from 1963, and they look like they've escaped from Baltimore.
Thank you, HUD.
And they won't let you actually knock them down, because they're of historic significance. So once you've gotten through that, then you could address any potential future use that's not encompassed in those other things.
So anybody that's listening and is looking for some good land,
Right.
So, which is not to say that there aren't potential development projects for that site, and and I'm not exaggerating there. That's basically, as far as I can summarize it, that is where we're at
Right.
with understanding
Right.
what the range of options for that site are. And we haven't even begun to address the highly technical aspects of what effect the George Miller Drive, which is effectively a bridge, has on the profile of the stream at that point, or upstream, or a variety of other questions. And so I feel it's fair to say that the complexity of that planning puzzle here is such that it's it's going to take some time to figure this stuff out. But that, I want to, again, before I finish talking and let somebody else talk, is that doesn't absolve anybody from what are the legally pertinent responsibilities and obligations of a property owner anywhere in town. And so I don't think that's, and I don't think that's being suggested that somehow those things won't be respected. So I don't, but that seems to me to be separating out the issues as far as I can do.
Well, I know Donna had a question, but I'm going to jump in first with just a follow-up here and say, so then how is the town burdened?
Right.
Because what you just told me says that the housing authority is going to own this when HUD is finished with it. So why is it that the town is burdened?
The wording of that sentence was not good. It was intended to be that it will not be in any way a burden. We were trying to assure you that we would not do something that might be burdensome, and it didn't come out there.
No, ma'am. Not at all.
I know. David,
It says exactly the opposite,
I know it didn't, but that was the intent, was to say, we know that there are the potential for things to happen to that property that could potentially have this collateral impact on the town. And that's not what we want. We don't want any of that to occur. We want this to end up to be not a burden to anybody, and certainly not to the town. And it was badly written, and I totally take responsibility, and I wholeheartedly apologize to you all for all of the concern that one sentence has caused. I really do. I'm really sorry, because it's been a big stressor for a lot of us. And it was intended to be assuring, in case people were thinking, well, what if this happened, and what if that happened, and what if, and it was like, no, don't go to any bad place. We're not going to do that. And it backfired.
So I'm sorry that I went.
Not at all.
Go ahead.
I think my comment has changed from my question a few moments ago. And I feel like the clarification was really helpful, even though if your intention was to console the board, it was the exact opposite. Just hearing how complicated it was, really good information.
I was just sharing, so I would hopefully feel better.
I guess, and I appreciate your intent. It makes sense to me. I guess I'm wondering, so there's this fairly important convening of folks in September at some point where the regulations, the barriers, the limits, the possibilities will at least be discussed initially. And I'm wondering if, rather than the board choosing to delay making a decision tonight, I'm wondering whether there might be a document created that arises out of that meeting with some of the possibilities, some of the ideas, and an underlined commitment to making sure, and I know that it's your intent that really came across, that this doesn't become a burden to the town in any way, shape, or form. It's clear to me that you're committed to not just not having that happen, but in fact taking it in the other direction. And it's also really reasonable that that's a complex process. But I think something in writing may be helpful to the select board.
So let me explain what the process is that we've embarked on. Right now we're taking public ideas, and we're going to bring those. First of all, there are 3 entities doing this. the Housing Authority, the Planning Services Office, ROD, and the West Brattleboro Association. And that core is the planning team, the planning group. So we're assembling all of these ideas, and then we're going to bring all these people together. And we are going to give them technical resources, which we will be sending to the board, to you folks. Our engineering analysis of Melrose, and what causes the flooding and how you might reduce the flooding. We've got that study. We've got a bunch of technical documents that we'll be sending, and we're going to certainly send those to you. We will have this convening, and out of that, we intend for that group to wrestle with all of the demands and the regulations and the funding and all of these issues that I think Rod laid out really well for you. The planning group will then get together and assemble a document that will give some direction for Melrose, exactly what you want. And it will say something like, it looks like these are the 5 most likely paths that we can take this property. And that will be a public document. And we intend, obviously, that will come to you, and it will be something that we would then, I would hope that we would be able to convene a public gathering to get reaction to that. Then the thought is, once we do that, we would bring the technical, regulating, all those people back together and say, all right, we've done some more work on this. We've actually gone and talked to historic preservation, and they've agreed that we can take down X number of buildings if we do this. And we've talked to natural resources, and they really want us to let the water flow through the property this way. These are some of the things that we need to get from these folks. And once we have that from them, then we can really start to make plans and find that good path for Melrose. In addition, there are entities out there in the state of Vermont that might in fact help with the purchase of this property in order for it to be flood mitigation property or open space. So we need to have them, and they will be part of this, so that we can be talking with them about their role in making that future happen. So that's the process. So it is intended very much that after this meeting in September, we will have a document. It will come, the board is invited to come to the meeting. The board is going to have, I hope, more than one representative there. And then we'll put this document together that the board will get, as well as the public and the commissioners, and from there there'll be the next step, which is, all right, let's dig into these 5 some more and see out of that, does one clearly rise up and seem to be the best way to go with the Melrose property.
So, if I could just ask one thing. Chris, so is it my understanding that Brattleboro Housing Authority, if Red Clover is developed, and that there will be no housing from Brattleboro Housing Authority at Melrose?
There will not. The intent is to remove public housing from Melrose.
Completely?
Completely. We have to, yes.
In 2 stages, is that correct?
In 2 stages.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's going to take,
Right.
Until 2018 to probably do that entirely.
But
yes,
at the end of the process,
there will not be public
no
housing there.
public housing
No.
at Melrose.
No.
Will we also to understand that at the end of that removal of public housing, that Brattleboro Housing Authority will remain the property owner unless there's some other disposition, and that HUD won't be the owner and the town won't be the owner, only the housing authority will be the owner?
The town would not be the owner, and HUD will not be the owner.
HUD's out of it right now, right?
HUD will be out of it soon, and you want HUD out of it.
Yes.
Because You have a cooperative agreement with the Brattleboro Housing Authority right now. The town does with the Housing Authority as long as that remains public housing. So you want it to get out of the public housing inventory so that you don't have any
Regulations.
any relationship with us over that property. That property then, as Rod said, reverts to standard land in the community, and we would be the owner. The housing authority may not be the owner, but if we are not, it would be a subsidiary limited liability corporation of the housing authority. So in effect, the housing authority or its entity is going to have that property.
Does
that answer your question, Mr. Gardner?
It does, yeah. Rod, does that change at the point where there is no housing, and this is just a question I'm asking, because I always get confused with what's taxable and what isn't taxable. Does that change the tax?
Yeah.
The tax structure of that land from now it's no longer under, well, it's still owned by Brattleboro Housing, but it's not used as. Do you understand where I'm going with this? I mean, does that change?
On paper, in theory, yes, it does change, but I don't think you should be expecting to see a big bump in your tax revenues. So the way it would change is that right now there's a formula that is used by Brattleboro Housing Authority that's provided by HUD, and it's referenced in the Declaration of Trust, and it's a payment in lieu of taxes for the Melrose project.
Right.
And so that's what Brattleboro Housing Authority, in part, because they have the same kinds of agreements with their other public housing projects in town, and that's what they pay when they pay their payment in lieu of taxes. That's how they figure out what to pay. My understanding is that when the Declaration of Trust, which is the equivalent to the title to the property deed, goes, then the pilot is no longer in effect. If it's an LLC, depending on the use and depending on how it's constructed, and depending on what happens with the buildings themselves, it's no longer subject to that pilot agreement, so taxes could be assessed, but you would be using appraised value, and you'd be using appraised value with a fair market value that is pretty low. That is assuming that it's not another not-for-profit entity that is managing them, and therefore I'm not sure how that would work, but they may be exempt again.
Mm-hmm.
The issue there would be, and this is a technical zoning ordinance distinction that's important, the use can continue. The use is established there. Those structures exist and they can continue to be used as housing. And that's not extinguished with the change of ownership. So a new owner, whether it's an LLC or a private owner, could continue to operate Melrose Terrace as housing. However, their ability to do that easily is severely constrained by other aspects of our regulations, up to and including it's no longer possible to build a dwelling unit in a floodway.
But if it's pre-existing?
If it's pre-existing and you continue to use it, if it's closed up and there's nothing happening there for 18 months and then you reopen it as housing, then you've got a problem. But if it's less than if it's vacant for 18 months or less, you could continue to use it as housing.
I got to make sure I get this right. So somebody could theoretically buy that
For cash.
for cash
With cash.
and reopen it as housing.
Yes. And then be constrained by
any new construction but
improvements
Or damage.
in any rolling 3-year period.
And then you're sitting with that problem too, and eventually you're going to want to sell it, and you got to find somebody who's going to put up with those constraints.
Right. Which, and I go to the trouble of explaining that in those terms because I think it's important for the select board to understand, as many of the possible future scenarios as there are. And that's definitely, while I think the probability of that is
Very slim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's one. I mean, it would just take a very bizarre combination of factors to explain that. Why you'd spend your cash doing that.
Right.
But because you couldn't borrow. And typically, I'm not an expert in the private rental market, but generally it's the capital asset is something that you like to leverage. So in other words, your ability to leverage the capital asset is how you actually generate your income to some extent. And so if you can't borrow against it, then it's worth less to you than if you can borrow against it. And you can't borrow against this with a mortgage because you won't get one.
Right.
So
But
it's dead money in that sense.
But if the price was right.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying, if
Right.
the housing authority wants to get rid of,
Yes.
it may be a garage sale, and
Yeah, I mean,
because
But there it would become somewhat of a burden on the town,
Yes.
and that is exactly what
Yes.
we
Yeah.
will not do with this
Okay.
property.
All right.
And that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
A
that's-
bargain basement sale of
Right.
Melrose, so that it can be run into the ground as housing, is not what we are intending. And if we were to do that, it would become a burden.
Right.
In some ways, to the town.
and I wasn't trying to get to that point,
But
right? But
that's-
it just ended up there.
You brought it up.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
that's
ended up there.
what was in my head when I was saying, we don't want this to
Right.
be in any way burdensome. And that's a scenario in which
Right.
I think it might have some ramifications on town services.
All right, so, yes, ma'am.
I'm Chris Connolly. I'm the commissioner on the board. I think what it comes down to is you have to trust us. 3 years ago, when we had that terrible, what we're saying is what we're going to do. 3 years ago, which none of us want to remember after Irene, when we tried to keep people housed until we could do something else. It took a long time, but you trusted us. And we worked very hard for 3 years with probably some of the best planning that I've ever seen in my life, and within working for different companies and things of that sort, to get to Red Clover Commons. And now we're saying again, we're not going to give up Melrose. We're not going to board it up and leave it. We're not going to let it just die. We are committed to find another good use for it. Chris has come out with this 100-year plan, this 100-idea plan. I put it out on Facebook. I got a whole bunch back, and they were great. They were things I had never heard of, and they would only benefit the community. So I think the bottom line is you trusted us 3 years ago, after a little bit of pressure, but you trusted us, and we came through. And we're going to do it with Melrose also. Trust us, and we will make sure that it is not a burden on the town. We have no intention of doing that. We want it, like Chris said, it's our legacy. And we're not going to leave it to be a broken down business. Our partners in this, the Planning Commission and West Brattleboro Association, they're not going to let that do that. We're coming back to you in 2 weeks to talk about the plan for what to do about Melrose, and we'll have more things to tell you at that time. We didn't want to confuse the two tonight, which is why we tried to separate them. But we have intricate plans in place to how to find a good use for Melrose. And all we're doing is asking you to trust us that we are going to do this. And we will follow through like we promised 3 years ago, and what we're trying to do tonight to get the PUD so that we can go forward and get people moved out of Melrose and start working on what its next phase is going to be. Thank you.
David, by the next meeting, would that?
Well, upon reading those letters about burden being imposed on the town, my initial reaction was to want to delay this vote on this PUD. Minutes of meetings are not intended to be verbatim transcriptions of what happened at a meeting. But if the minutes say the following, and I can give you this language, then I'm prepared, to vote tonight. So the board raised concerns, and this part I haven't written yet, about disposition of Melrose. BHA's intent is to remove housing in 2 phases from Melrose within 18 months.
Oh.
No. By 2018.
Yes.
By 2018.
Because that's aggressive.
All right, in 2 phases by 2018. I'm sorry.
No pressure.
From Melrose in 2 phases by 2018. Upon removal of housing, HUD's interest in the property will end. The town will have no property interest, and Brattleboro Housing Authority or its successor will own the property. Brattleboro Housing Authority further commits to a disposition that will not result in burden to the town. I mean, if that's accurate, then...
That's what that stupid letter was.
but Chris, that's not what it said. It said the opposite.
I know.
So, I mean, if that's what's reflected in the minutes, then I'm comfortable going forward.
So Janet can't say much discussion by the board. Okay.
Well, I'll give this, I mean, I've got it written down in notes anyway.
Are we ready for motion?
With that, in the minutes, and if that's what they've agreed to, then I'm ready for motion. What?
That's good. But do you want to close the public hearing and then move?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any further comment to be had at the public hearing?
Glad you're here.
Hearing none. Close the public hearing. So now I think, is there any further discussion on the request for an amendment to the zoning ordinance to include this property in the PUD?
No, but Donna wants to read the motion.
Having no further discussion, Donna, we're ready for motion.
All right, I move that we adopt the proposed amendment to section 5417 of the Brattleboro zoning ordinance, which adds Red Clover Commons and thereby changes the zoning of the parcel from commercial to planned unit development.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And we oppose or abstaining, that carries 4-0. Sorry to put you through the ringer. We have some questions.
Now, you need to make sure that that statement that you just read out before the public hearing was shut, you got to put that
It's going
in.
to Jen. Yeah, it'll be in the minutes, and I'll look for it in the next minutes.
Okay, so you're good?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Marshall.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marshall.
I'm glad we do have somebody here that knows Robert's rules.
And then the next matter on the agenda is Energy Settlement Funds Working Group.
Yep.
I think that's also in Rod's corner.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. So, as you may recall, at the Select Board meeting of July 15th, the Energy Settlement Funds Working Group was brought into existence by a motion from this board, and it comprises Kate, Elizabeth McLaughlin, who's on the Planning Commission, myself, Russell Rice, the Town Assessor, and Kim Ellison, who's the Grants Manager. So there's 3 staff and 2 volunteer members to this. And our charge is to identify and advocate for the town's interests in the Windham County Economic Development Energy Settlement Funds and parallel Energy Clean Energy Funds, and after receiving the funds, to continue in an organised manner to maximise use of the funds. There you have a kind of assumption that we're actually going to get funds, but set that aside. So we've met once and had some, it was basically a work meeting where we worked through the basic material, if you like, that we would use to construct a process here. And the first thing that I need to make clear is that there was some question prior to the rules finally becoming solidified that as to whether the town would have the ability to review any application that affected or took place in Brattleboro. And I can confirm that any application affecting a town in Windham County the applicants need to obtain a support letter from the affected municipality. And a typical support letter in this setting would basically review the guiding document, which is here, the town plan, and we would, after review, determine whether the proposed application conformed to the town plan or not. I want to emphasize also that this doesn't just mean that we find language in the economic development chapter, for instance, that seems to support the project or the proposed project, but that when we review all chapters of the town plan, we don't find anything that it would conflict with. For instance, something that is identified as a resource in the natural resource chapter, or a cultural asset that is of some serious value to the town that's been identified that would be at risk because if we would pursue this project. So it's both a impact and positive addition, positive gain review, if you like. So when we actually met the first time, the so-called notice of funds availability and the 21-page automatically fillable PDF application form had not been released. They were released on the Monday after we met, and so that, in fact, that was not, I guess it was last Monday. And so staff have reviewed both the notice of funding availability and the application form. The application form is pretty much what you'd expect. I think it's going to be somewhat challenging unless an entity has a project that is almost ready to go, given the very tight timelines. Think here perhaps of the struggle that we had around the so-called shovel-ready projects under the ARA program of the federal government, where they announced that they would make available very large amounts of money for so-called shovel-ready projects, and then of course the realization was that any municipality or governmental entity doesn't have very many shovel-ready projects on the shelf because you're not going to spend the money on a feasibility study and an engineering report unless the money's available. So there's a parallel kind of thing going on here, which is if you're a local business, either you're about to do it anyway and this could help you out, or you have to start thinking very fast. Working back from the dates, the submission date for any application, both and this would include if the town was going to apply, as well as any private applicant or another not-for-profit in the region or in the county. It's 4:30 p.m. September the 23rd. For us to really, if you back out of that and think, well, how long do we need to do a support letter review, which is not a small thing if you're actually both reading the town plan for things that are affirmative and things that are potentially negative. It's not a quick exercise. We actually came up with September the 9th as being kind of the deadline to sort of really operationalize that in this first round. So that's just to underscore the incredible time pressure that we as a potential applicant and anybody else might be contemplating. And that's working with the expectation that the governor will be making announcements either in late November or early December. So I'm thinking he's got Christmas in mind. So that's the key part about the requirements. The level of detail called for in the application is pretty rigorous. It's similar in scope and as detailed to a standard VCDP application, and so again, that will take some time. For private applicants, there's the Small Business Development Center, the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and both those entities who are able to provide support for a private application. Wyndham Regional Commission is apparently offering support on for municipal applications, including public infrastructure investment projects or assistance with response to applications. I don't believe we're necessarily in a situation to need to call on that. So if you go back to the memo, we have some questions that it would be useful to get direction from the select board on. And the first is We think that it's appropriate to review any application that comes in and to provide a commitment to providing a support letter or a letter that explains why we cannot support the application. There's a kind of another layer to this, which is how do we want to arrive at determining the level of support? So within the application process itself, you score points for, the term is leveraging, which is to say an applicant assembles a project that shows that they've gotten multiple sources of financial support and financial commitment. So that could be, a hypothetical case could be a small business operator in this town gets a commitment from, say, the Brattleboro Savings and Loan for a certain amount of money, from VCDP itself or someone similar, another state agency or another granting agency of a certain amount of money. And then they want to apply for up to $350,000 from this fund. And then they want to back that with some funding from the town through the town's revolving loan fund. Usually what we're referring to now as the Small Business Assistance Program. So we could, as a entity, need to determine whether we're willing to go above and beyond a standard support letter and show another level of commitment to an individual applicant and say, yes, here's the support letter saying that it conforms to the town plan, and here's yet another letter with a promise of, you know, a commitment of funds to further your project. That colloquially gets referred to as picking winners, and it usually sets politicians and bureaucrats like me on edge, mostly because of the attacks that we receive because we're apparently really crap at picking winners. But there's a lot.
That's just a generalization.
Yeah, I think so. You up for it, John? So in that instance, you know, it sort of requires a policy decision, or at least some reflection on your part as a board as to whether you want to entertain, you know, a system basically using criteria that would be drawn from the town plan or similar that would allow you and whoever the group is that reviews the applications to be able to say, of 3 hypothetical applications, we like number 2 better than number 1 and 3. All 3 will get a support letter, but number 2 we are also willing to make a commitment to, right? In recognition of the criteria, the scoring system based criteria that are used in the ACCD application itself, and criteria that we could develop ourselves that would match that. So that's the first policy question.
Do you want us to answer them one at a time, or do they relate to each other?
You can answer them whatever you want to do.
Well, our attention span is short. Speaking for myself, you know.
I think I've probably fried your attention span, but that's not what I had in mind.
I am so glad you said that.
So I'm not opposed to having.
I'm just warming up.
I'm not opposed to having a ranking system. Anybody else?
No.
I have some vague reservations, and I'm not quite sure what
I know. It sounds
that's
almost
not
more
good enough.
complicated than it should be.
I guess for me, I'm not sure that the select board should be in that particular role. And I think the things that that you mentioned about it being fairly political, I absolutely think that we need to make sure that the applications fit with the town plan.
Mm-hmm.
That seems very straightforward. But there's something about us being the ones to decide which of those applicants receive what level of support. I'd have to sit with that for a little bit. I would love to hear from other members of the select board.
No, I was thinking kind of the same thing. There's just something about it that doesn't feel right.
Well, this really goes back to a core question about what is the town's role in economic development.
Right.
It does.
And while we were in the budget redevelopment process, people were coming back to us and saying, you need to act more aggressively to work to reestablish the commercial base. And the problem that we're having here is that there has been business flight, and therefore the tax base has shrunk. And I am at least willing to consider looking at what a factor analysis would look like in order to try to decide if it's a good or a bad idea. That's where I'm at. If you all are against it, that's fine, and we won't do it. But I don't want to rule it out at this point, because I don't know what role the town should have with respect to economic development yet. That's something that I think we need to focus on more.
Can I make a process suggestion? I would love to hear all of the questions, and any
Now?
the questions that you have for us. I would like to hear.
one big chunk, and okay.
And then I would suggest, as unpopular as I might become immediately for suggesting this, that the board convene a meeting to really see if we can get to the bottom of what this board believes is our responsibility with regard to economic development, and answer your questions in a timely fashion.
Could I just ask one thing? I would like to know, because Kate's on that, what your thoughts are.
Well, as Rod was talking, I was just thinking of a thought that maybe is irrelevant, but with respect to the revolving loan fund, people now come in and fill out an application for a grant for the revolving loan fund. So I think in some respects what we're saying and what Rod is saying is they're going to go through that. Some of them will go through that process anyway.
Right.
What this is connecting it to another process that's already in play. Like, this is a process that's in play,
Which we authorize anyways at the end of it.
and that's and so I think that's something to think about. That money, some of these projects would come and ask for money from the town's revolving loan fund anyway.
In conjunction with.
Well, sometimes, outside of the fact that there's this energy money in play, some of these projects come forward and looking for money anyway.
Right. Let me follow up on Kate's point and hopefully also address Donna's. So, and let me just remind you that right now we've scheduled another meeting for this working group tomorrow at lunchtime, which will be meeting in the Hannah. And so the idea that I really want to try and get some direction from you as a group so that we could pursue our work a little bit more tightly focused. And so, in general, I wanted to sort of have you address that principal question of, is that where you're at? The town has a small toolkit when it comes to economic development, and we do reasonably well with the toolkit that we've got. So right now we have a revolving loan fund that is sourced from what we call, somewhat euphemistically, program income. And that big pot of money called program income supports a range of programs that all, in some way or another, are consistent with the VCDP operating principles, and that's a requirement that we have. We can't buy furniture for the office with it or back pay people. There's only certain things you can do with it, and in broad terms, it has to conform to community development or economic development activities, or affordable housing, and maybe historic preservation. So that would be the range of activities you could take program income and spend it on. We use that in a little kind of spinner called our own revolving loan fund, which is called the Small Business Assistance Program. And we have another one that's even smaller than that called the Rental Housing Improvement Program. Both these tiny programs lend out money to eligible applicants at low interest, very low interest, over usually 5 years, and fairly gentle terms. And it's flexible. Sometimes it's a balloon payment. Sometimes it's a delay before they make their first payment. It depends on the circumstances. And in particular, with the Small Business Assistance Program, many of the town's successful restaurants owe their success in no small part to utilizing the Small Business Assistance Program. And it's a very particular feature of restaurants that means that they end up needing that source of income. So, one of the pieces of feedback we've received over the years is that $40,000, which is the limit for Small Business Assistance Program loans in the town of Brattleboro, is too small. And it's become, 10 or 15 years ago, $40,000 was worth more than it is now. To put it in context, it doesn't buy a lot of kitchen equipment. So, one idea would be to increase the minimum amount of the Small Business Assistance Program to, say, $100,000. Then if you step back to that earlier question that I was asking about, if we were going to show support to an applicant that was higher than just a support letter that said this
Right.
conforms to the town plan, and we were going to actually use the revolving loan fund to support them, it could make a real difference if we were going to actually support them to the tune of $100,000. So as long as we use clear criteria, and we already review applicants under the terms of the Small Business Assistance Program, we are currently reviewing those for how effective they are and whether they need to be changed or not. But we have a banker on that panel. We have people from, a representative from BDCC, and we have people, who are, and John O'Connor and the grant manager. So we have a lot of people with background being able to look at a business plan and look at people's financials and make a determination as to whether they are a suitable risk for the $40,000 in the first instance, and whether the business really calls for it. The pressure, of course, increases if you increase the amount of money that you're willing to lend.
That's what I was just thinking.
Quite a bit.
Are we on the hook for more debt?
And one goes bad, and it's really bad, relatively speaking. However, if you go back to the guidelines, the application for ACCD funds, the leveraging component there speaks to the ability of an applicant to put together a pool of funds from various sources, which could include the town. So there's ways in which we could really advance economic development projects in the town of Brattleboro by being willing and able to support them that much. Right? Now, also, it's important to remember, just because we say we've increased the limit to $100,000, you don't have to give them $100,000.
Right.
Maybe they only require 60 or 44, but it gives you the flexibility to go up to 100.
So that makes us more user-friendly. I mean, it gives us a better...
Right. And we're relatively quick with that turnaround. I mean, if somebody submits an application to Kim,
Right.
I think the quickest time we've turned around an application for $40,000 is less than a month.
Where does that small business assistance program money come from?
The program income.
Program income.
Oh, it's program income?
Yeah.
Right. Now, so here we go with the problem, though. At $40,000 a hit, and we're doing one or maybe two a year, it's no big. You don't really notice the hole. If we lend out three hits of 100, you're going to notice the hole. It's going to be pretty big.
Well, we get monthly the balance sheet for the program income. How much is the program income now? Do we know?
It's about 400.
Right.
It's low.
It's lower than that.
Yeah. It's closer to 3.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are calling on it. Yeah, it might be closer to 3. I think it was like, okay. I talked to Kim about it, and there was some speculation as to where we've made a couple of agreements recently, and the other thing that's problematic about it is more than one thing sucks money out of the program income, including rental housing improvement program. So there's a way in which we need to kind of either be more refined in our structure so that we know what the actual limit is, or I think it's possible to, and I would want to hear from John O'Connor and others on this, but I think it's possible to argue that we're responding to every application that we get, but if we were to be more aggressive in pushing out the Small Business Assistance Program in particular, we would run into this issue sooner or later of, we'd have to figure out that what we're lending out is balanced by what we're receiving back. The good news is that in November we will start receiving back substantially.
But Brooks.
No, Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Oh, Commonwealth. All right. Good.
But Rod, we can also apply from the energy money.
Yes.
Put into that fund.
Exactly, which is going to be the next point. So, but they wouldn't do that unless we could demonstrate that we've put it out there, and then they're not going to go, oh yeah, I can imagine that 2 years from now you're going to need some topping up, so we'll give it to you now. You're going to have to go to them with that empty bowl and go,
Can you put it in?
yeah. And so that could be our own grant application, which is to boost the revolving loan fund. But
Right.
so we have to get aggressive about
Yeah.
putting it out, right? So these are
Those are
what,
3 questions. It's, do we want to pick winners? Do we want to increase the loan limit? And
Yep.
do we want to apply for grant money? Are
Yes.
there other questions, or are those 3?
do we want to think about the limitations that are on the Clean Energy Development Fund monies, which is about $2.6 million? There's a draft discussion of, it's a little hard to tell what's really going on there. There's a draft document that's out for public comment, but it appears as if they've already decided the Windham County part, including the $2.6 million, which comes from Vermont Yankee. And they've made a priority to boost the pellet and wood chip industry in the state as a whole, and in particular in Windham County. And their path to doing this is to coax more schools and municipal buildings onto the pellet and or wood chip based heating system by strategically using $1.6 million. They call it leveraging. I'm not sure exactly what they got in mind. So the euphemism that remains unclear to me in this instance. With the goal of 90% of Windham County school children attending schools will be schools heated by wood chips or pellets by 2016. Now, I don't know how many school children are in the BAMS BUHS system relative to the other schools. I know that's already on wood chips. So there's a way in which this is clearly angled at towns other than Brattleboro. And so there could be some industrial, some economic development opportunities embedded in this. And so an application could come forward where somebody is providing a service or a piece of equipment or even a financing tool to facilitate schools and municipalities switching from, say, fuel oil to wood chips and wood pellets. I don't know of anyone doing that right now, but it's conceivable that could happen. So the question for the town is, if we shape things in the right way, you could do the twofer. You could try and use ACCD funds and Clean Energy Development Fund monies for a specific project, but it's very narrowly drawn, I think. And it seems to me a very hard shot to pull off, but it's worth thinking about. So that's the last one. So that's, right?
That's four.
Good.
Cross table. What do you think about those 4 questions preliminarily?
Donna?
I would say, I don't know.
Yes, you're a waffle too.
But there's part of me that would really like the opportunity to look at supporting potential business owners to a greater degree. I think that would make a substantial difference in terms of economic development. And I'm not going to weigh in at this point whether I think the select board should be the ones, choosing how much and who to give money to, but I think ultimately that would end up in our lap. Somebody remind me, number 2 is?
Increasing to $100,000.
Yes, I definitely think that we should look at applications with an eye toward the amount of money that would be most appropriate to give, and to have fluidity there makes perfect sense to me. Number 3?
Donna, you're supposed to remember these.
I know.
No.
You've already confessed to my...
I said my attention span was short. That's why I tried to do them one at a time.
To apply for the fund?
Yes, well,
We applied.
Yeah.
We applied to fill the fund up.
Are you happy with the town
empty
applying?
bowl.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We should go with our begging bowl empty. Perfect sense.
Okay.
And number 4, I should really remember
This was just doing the clean energy and the revolving loan and the economic development together to the extent it's possible.
Yes, that seems like a perfect thing to do in tandem. So.
Okay, so you want to see if we can find out more about that?
I do.
Okay.
I'm happy with the first 3 completely. I think it's going to end up in our laps anyways, Donna, because all the grants basically, end up in our laps, because we have the final say on them. So how we structure that.
And you don't think we should form a committee?
No.
You already have.
Yeah, he is the committee, and so is this one. So And number two, absolutely. That was increasing the,
The limit to 100K.
that just sends out a great message. Number three was the empty bowl.
Yep.
Go for it. Number four, I'm still, I'm on the fence on.
All right.
But
What is,
That's
clean energy.
pursuing, trying to get a project that would.
why are you on the fence?
Well, I don't know, because I just don't know, again, if there's enough of a need for that.
Right, but what's the, I don't mean to argue, but
No,
what's
no.
the downside for?
There is no downside, but
Right.
I'm
My mental health.
I'm taking I'm taking one of four that I don't see. There is no downside,
Right.
but I don't see the.
Yeah, I don't mean
Right.
to, I was just wanting
no,
to
argue.
understand your thoughts.
It's just kind of a.
Because it's only 8:30 and
It's a probability
Staff time
benefit.
on a
that's
long
all.
shot
Yeah.
is the downside.
Right. Staff time on long shot. That's a great way to put it. But if it's, go ahead.
No, I was just interested in knowing what your thought process was.
Well, again,
So I could put it into
on an
my
empty
background.
stomach at 8:30.
Yes, Kate.
So,
Yeah.
You're next.
Well, I'm on the committee, so I'm going to be giving myself advice. And I think we touched upon this. It's the first one that I think is of the most concern for everybody, because once you start offering opinions, you're going into the world of politics. But I do think there needs to be a way that we support
Right.
the good projects that we want to go forward. And in a lot of ways, that could be through the small business fund. So, I mean, you're hearing this from me tomorrow, but I think I think everything else is really great, and I think we just have to figure out a way to finesse that first one. I mean, ultimately, the governor's going to be. I mean, we're in this sort of the same position. It is going to come down to us expressing our opinions, and so it's all the way. In a lot of ways, it's a political process the whole way up the system. You know what I mean? Because it ends with a political process, and how do we want to be sort of seeing ourselves in that process?
So that was my last question. So it does ultimately come down to the governor
Right.
on where this is allocated, right?
That's correct.
Based on advice.
Based on advice
from
from
ACCD. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And he can listen to all of us. And I mean, in our letter, I mean, I think we need to think about this too, is,
How strongly we.
well, and I mean, it ultimately, and granted, we don't know what he's thinking, but a letter from the town of Brattleboro supporting a project could go a long way, or he might not care, but, I mean, I think that's sort of, we don't know what it's going to be, but, if there's a letter from the town saying we strongly support this project, I don't think that can go ignored, or it could, but I mean, there's consequences to him saying, no, I don't care what the town of Brattleboro says.
Well,
So,
I think we got a good feeling when we were up there that.
right. Well, that's why I think we really
Right.
need to think about
Right.
whether we want to, if there's a benefit for us to prioritize, if our voice is going to be a strong voice when it gets to the top,
Well, I don't think letters hurt. So.
Well, I'm in favor of looking into all four of these alternatives. I think that in the 3 or 4 years that I've been on the board, our direct involvement in economic development activities has been relatively thin. And I think that if these are the tools that are available to us, can't hurt to try to make positive change by using them. And these appear to be at least potential effective ways to do so. So I'm in favor at this point of exploring these, how will ultimately come out on any given project, or willingness to pick a winner. It's hard to say, but I'm certainly in favor of looking at all four of them.
Great. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, David. Couple things. One, I think the town is in really good position to be an applicant to ACCD. We've got a long history of providing loans and managing a loan program, which not every town has. So, I would certainly applaud any attempt to approach ACCD to seek resources to bolster the SBAP program. I think would be a really wise move. I suggest approaching very carefully the idea of picking winners.
And then there was silence.
So what is it like?
Well, this is a political body that has a political geography that it, works within. And, my thinking is business activity in Brattleboro is a good thing, regardless of what sector they operate in, what type of, as long as it's legal business. They're good. They're all good. So, picking winners can be difficult. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's difficult. And supporting, on the other hand, for example, like with the SBAP program, we make loans as a town based on someone's ability to be a good borrower. That's really, I think that's something worth supporting. And so we've got a strong program. We can make it stronger potentially through an application to this state program. I think that's win-win, absolutely.
I just want to make sure that we put out there in the business world that we are willing to, to work with business and to, because I think we have been for a long time business unfriendly. And I really want to get that perception out there that we are not, the door's open and we're going to do our damnedest to, to get businesses to come. It was great when Commonwealth Yogurt came in. And we need 20 more businesses like that. So I think anything that we can do to generate the appearance that we're user-friendly, I'm all for it. And again, I see what you're saying about picking winners, but I would love to see a flood of applications in so that we could, to look them over. So I'm hoping it works.
Okay, me too.
You have what you need from us?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
Sorry
you
to
for
take
staying.
so much of your time.
No, I think it was way
great.
helpful. It answered some of the questions about the role of the board in the town and economic development, which were open questions anyway that we wanted to talk about for a while.
And
Thanks.
you now feel better about the PUD process too, I think.
Yes.
If you didn't talk so long about red clover, we would have been, but that's okay.
Honestly,
So-
your explanation of the conundrum there was really spot on. Well done.
Donna,
Yeah,
can you
Yeah.
tell me if it's raining out?
Good night.
Tell you if it's raining.
No.
No?
It's not raining.
Good. Well,
All right, so
Convertible.
the next item on the agenda is accept and appropriate a grant for AOT Western Avenue surface maintenance. Patrick?
Yes, sir. This is the $150,000 that we were very fortunate to receive from the Agency of Transportation. Thank you, Governor Shumlin. This work will be getting underway very shortly, and this is the opportunity for the board to accept and appropriate the $150,000 to resurface I-91 from roughly exit 2 to Edward Heights.
I move to accept and appropriate a surface maintenance grant in the amount of $150,000 from the Vermont Agency of Transportation for surface maintenance on TH-2/VT Route 9 between mile marker 4.178 and 6.140.
I was all ready to make that motion as somebody who got a flat tire on one of those potholes.
Do you want to make the motion instead of me? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That carries 3-0. Next matter on the agenda is grant application for Vermont Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security grant. Patrick?
Yes, sir. This is we lost the chief,
We lost the
unfortunately.
chief.
He had to run away. This is a grant that for the Brattleboro Fire Department for a combination of different trainings, including ropes rescue, swiftwater rescue, large vehicle extraction, structural collapse rescue, etc. This will also replace approximately 2,000 feet of the ropes that we use in a variety of rescues, which, by the way, technical ropes are extremely expensive. So this would be a $73,492.62 grant application to the Vermont Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security.
Ready for motion?
To approve a grant application in the amount of $73,492.62 to the Vermont Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security for a special operation training and equipment grant to provide for shift, fill, overtime, and equipment replacement costs for the Brattleboro Fire Department.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is the $600 First Wednesdays program grant. Patrick?
There's very little to add to that. The Brooks Memorial Library annually has a First Wednesday lecture series. This is a grant application to the Department of Libraries in support of that program. I have nothing further.
Is there any further discussion? We're ready for motion.
I move that we approve a grant application in the amount of $600 to the Vermont Department of Libraries to support the 2014-2015 season First Wednesdays lecture series at Brooks Memorial Library.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is amendment to the Code of Ordinances to make the east side of Bridge Street, Depot Street, no parking. So we're going to start with a public reading, that being the second reading, and then we're going to open the public hearing, even though Rod's not here to remind me. Patrick, would you please read the changes for the second reading?
Yes, sir. This is for Appendix C of the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Section 16-100, no parking areas, and we would be adding number 17 on the easterly side of Depot Street, the entire length thereof, beginning at the known southerly edge of the right-of-way of Bridge Street and proceeding southerly and easterly along the street and roundabout for approximately 370 feet from Bridge Street to a point at the southernmost point of the roundabout located at the northeast corner of the access road to Barrows and Fisher Oil Company. Second half of this would be Section 16-101, limited parking area, where we would strike number 7.
That second reading having now concluded, I open the public hearing on the amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Appendix C, Section 16-100, Paragraph 17, and Section 16-101. It should be noted that this will provide for a no parking area on the east side of Depot Street from Bridge Street to the end of the roundabout, or the end of the circle. Is there any further comment to be had during this public hearing? Hearing no further public comment, I close the public hearing. We're ready for a motion.
To approve the ordinance amendment to Appendix C, Article 2, Section 16-100, no parking, and 16-101, limited parking as presented.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is Town Manager Search Citizen Committee. At the last Select Board meeting, I noted that information about the Town Manager Search had been prematurely disclosed, and it had caused damage, harm to the process and to people involved in the process. There was some question whether the Citizen Search Committee should be reconstituted. I've had an opportunity to speak personally with that member of the Citizen Search Committee and to reinforce the real need for confidentiality through the town manager search process. And I want to reiterate everybody who's involved in the town manager search process going forward has to be fully committed to confidentiality until it's time to disclose information. I have no motion to make, and I'm not looking for any reconstituting the committee at this point. But if anybody else has got anything to say about it, I thought it should be on the agenda.
No, but I think if you said it slowly enough, which you did, that hopefully the point will get out there.
Well, I think that going forward, I will make clearer that confidentiality is an absolute requirement of participation in this, and I did communicate it to the member of the search committee who shared information with the press, and I think that he fully understood. And, I don't think there's any need for any further action at this point. So the next matter on the agenda is committee appointments. We have, I think, 2 different people who've put their names in. Ann Britton for the Energy Committee and Michael Fairchild for the Conservation Commission. Do we have nominations?
I move that we appoint Ann Britton to the Energy Committee and Michael Fairchild to the Conservation Commission.
And Ann Britton for a 1-year term?
Or what, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
You're
Jan,
welcome.
whatever you say.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of those nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is adoption of select board goals. Patrick had circulated, or list had been circulated with the goals. I did some editing, and I'd like to ask everybody to read through the edited list there, the changes that I suggested. Deleted some of the more vague goals, like what should we do when, and let's be the best we can be. And
They were reworked beautifully, I think.
that's nice of you.
They were.
So,
I like how we did it. It was more normal.
We didn't.
You know,
So-
hey, what are we doing?
I guess the only questions I have, I personally am not in favor of charter changes to make the terms longer.
I'm not either, to be honest with you. But if we want to talk about it, but it's not a goal for me.
It's not a goal for me either.
It's not a goal. It was more of a suggestion.
All right, well then let's strike off number 6, charter change.
It's the only one I had.
I respect you from
No, you don't.
now till forever, Tom, but, you know, we'll take number 6
There
off.
needs to be term
I totally do, I totally do.
Okay, well, I'm not buying it, buddy. But that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not feeling it.
And then promoting redevelopment of the Brooks House, I mean,
That's it.
Check. Take it off.
That's a
you want to take it?
Yeah, let's take it off.
That number 3 under economic development?
Yeah.
All right,
Off with
so
its head.
promoting redevelopment of the Brooks House, I think that's a private venture. We've already supported them, so we'll take off number 3 under economic development. Is that okay as well? All right, so the list of select board goals as edited with number 3 under economic development and number 6 under miscellaneous deleted. All those in favor of those goals, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. You comfortable?
Oh, no, she's just really scratching mine out like it was
Very
like
good.
the rudest thing ever.
Is there any further business to come in front of the board tonight? Well, then, we're ready for somebody to read the calendar.
John?
I read it the
John.
last time.
I'll read the calendar.
There you go.
Dave,
All right, I'll read the calendar.
thank you. This was a short one.
Is it?
Yeah.
Look at that. All right, Friday, August 8th, from 10 to 11:30, the ADA Advisory Committee at the Marlborough College Graduate Center VCIL Conference Room. Monday, August 11th, Rec and Parks Board Meeting at the Gibson-Aiken Center from 6 to 7:30, and Board of Civil Authority Tax Assessment Appeal Hearings, 6:30 to 8:30, at the Hannah Cosman Meeting Room. On Tuesday, August 12th, Tree Advisory Committee at the Hannah Cosman Meeting Room from 7 to 9 p.m. Wednesday, August 13, 6 to 7:30 p.m., the Ad Hoc Futures Committee at the Hannah Cosman Meeting Room.
It's raining lightly.
August 18th, 7 to 9 p.m., Development Review Board at the Select Board Meeting Room. Tuesday, August 19th, 6:15 till whenever, Select Board meeting in the Select Board Meeting Room. Ready for motion to adjourn? We have a motion to adjourn. Everybody in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Thank you, ASL interpreters. Thank you, VCTV. Thank you, other members of the press. Good night.